Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk about China's role in global governance, which is a very timely and important topic nowadays. So there are three main parts of my talk today. So first of all, I will very briefly define global governance, just in case the term is not familiar to some people. Then I will very quickly go through China's evolving role in the global economic governance since 1940s, so I can't go into details. That can take days, so it'll be very brief. And in the end, I will highlight two issue areas that we want to elaborate later today: climate change and digital network. But I'll leave more details to my fellow panelists to elaborate in the breakout rooms. Okay, so first of all, global governance. So it is a rather broad term, okay? It is a term that has not been used actually for that long, okay? It's a relatively new term. It is subject to a variety of meanings, and it has been used in an analytical sense to refer to an approach to world politics distinct from a traditional international relations theorizing. So different scholars give different definitions to global governance. So first of all, James Rusnell was one of the first scholars analyzed the term global governance. So he defined global governance as governance without governments. So obviously, he does not mean that state governments do not play a role in global governance. Of course, state governments play a very important role. But what he tries to say is, other than the state governments, other than the issues that state governments can deal with, there are broader global issues out there which are taken care by non-state actors as well. So O'Brien and Williams defined global governance as the overarching system that regulates human affairs on a worldwide basis. So as you can see, it's a rather broad definition. Another one is by the Commission of Global Governance in 1995. So they define global governance as the sum of the many ways individuals and institutions, be public and private, manage their common affairs. It is a multi-level collections of governance related activities, rules, and mechanisms, be formal and informal, public and private, existing in the world today. So as you can see, because of the world is becoming more and more integrated and connected, a lot of issues are cross-border. A lot of issues are global, and they also involve the multiple actors who have responsible towards some of these issues, okay? Which refers to the second concept that I want to speak about, which is the actors. So which actors are involved in global governance? Okay, so the mechanisms and rules of global governance are created by the actions and agreements of key actors in the global system. Of course, the primary political actor is the state. It's still the state. States still play a very important role, but other actors such as corporations and civic associations can also influence and participate in global governance. Yeah. A striking feature of global governance in the past 50 years has been the increasing role played by regional and international organizations in facilitating governance. But more recent developments have been the growing role of corporations and the mobilization of citizens through civic associations. Okay? So, after the very quick explanation of these relevant terms, I would like to walk you through very quickly, running through actually China's evolving role in global economic governance. So when we talk about China's role in global governance, many would start from 1980s because China has not been that active in the international political society for that long. In fact, China has been an important player in international politics for a long time. When we talk about the modern contemporary international economic regime, we very much refers back to the Bretton Woods, which was at the dawn of the Second World War. In 1944. Actually, back then it was the Republic of China. They actually sent representatives to join the Bretton Woods system. So China was actually a founding member of Bretton Woods. Then after 1949, Taiwan was representing China in these institutions in World Bank and IMF until the 1970s when China wanted to become more active in the international community. They started to talk with these key international organizations, and until the 1980s, People's Republic of China took over the representation of China. And since then, China has been a very key player in the international political community. So I divided China's role in in global economic governance in several stages. So the first stage was between 1980s and 1990s. I call that a learning period. So in that period, China actually learned a series of modern techniques and skills, methods of operating a more liberal economic regime from key international institutions like the World Bank and IMF. So China joined the World Bank and IMF in the very early 1980s, and China joined the ADB in 1986. So I'm talking about when People's Republic of China took over the representation. So it was the very early 80s in the World Bank and IMF, and 1986 in the ADB. So since then, China has learned a lot from these institutions. For example, under these institutions' help, China adopted using GDP to measure the national economy, right? Also, China received some advice from these institutions in how to liberalize China's economic regime, for example, how to reform the exchange rate regime, how to reform the interest rate regime, etc. And also, China has collaborated with these institutions a lot in all kinds of infrastructure projects. And in the 1990s, China went through a whole series of economic liberalization to prepare itself for the forthcoming WTO membership. So between 2001 and 2008, I call it a period of exploring and utilizing. So China joined the WTO in 2001 to access to a larger world market. And since then, China became a big part of this so-called liberal international economic system. And China's export soared. China became the most important trade partner of many countries in the world. And at the same time, China also accumulated trade surplus with several Western countries, especially the US. This slowly made the US start to worry about benefit of globalization being taken away by the Chinese, and the US started to push the IMF to punish China on its exchange rate regime, but didn't really work out. At the same time, China felt like it was underrepresented in the World Bank and IMF. So on the one hand, China's economic role became more and more important, but on the other hand, China feels it was underrepresented. Then move on to the next stage between 2009 and 2012, which I call voicing and unsatisfied. During that period, China became a crucial global creditor after the global financial crisis, and China continues to ask for more governance power in international organizations, but not satisfied. Then in the most recent period, which I call creating, China led the establishment of some new international institutions. For example, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or New Development Bank, which really shows China's increasing ambition in becoming a more important player of international political society. So you can see China becomes very active in the regional organizations such as the ASEAN Plus 3, and also China has been promoting the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and in China also plays an active role in pushing towards trans-regional collaborations under the New Development Bank or under the 17+1, which is China plus 17 Central and European countries in collaborating for economic investment projects. Then, of course, there's the ambitious and the famous Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, so now let me very quickly highlight the two important issue areas that will be elaborated later in the breakout room. The first one is climate change. So let me continue from where I ended earlier, AIIB. So a question that has been asked by many international politics scholars is China creating an alternative global economic regime to challenge the existing one by creating alternative multilateral development banks like the AIIB? So in order to answer a question like that, we will need to look at what AIIB does. Is what AIIB doing very different from the traditional multilateral development banks? Yes, they have a lot of innovations. They have they propose a new kind of institutional structure, new kind of procedure for operating infrastructure projects. One key difference is AIIB concentrates on infrastructure projects only. Okay, they only do infrastructure projects. So we know that infrastructure projects often have controversial impacts on environment, right? So people ask whether a institution led by China will be able to lead infrastructure projects that are environmental friendly, which are sustainable, especially considering what China has been struggling in the past decades within China, right? Trying to develop more environmentally friendly. So people ask whether, you know, these institutions will really bring out innovative approaches to which are more environmental friendly to infrastructure projects. So the second concept is a Green Belt and Road Initiative. So that's another very interesting concept. President Xi Jinping said we should pursue the new vision of green development and a way of life and a work that is green, low carbon, circular, and sustainable. It shows there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of ambition at the top leader level, want to install these BRI projects in an environmentally friendly way. But then if you look at the all the complicated multiple agencies involved in BRI projects, including financial institutions, state-owned enterprises, or funds, or ministries, it makes scholars think, how do they actually coordinate, right? To what extent do they prioritize sustainability? How do they coordinate? How do they make sure this green concept are not just at the top level leaders' goodwill, but it will actually be implemented? So that's something we will continue to observe in the future. Last but not least, the second issue is a digital network. So at the moment, a lot of attentions are given to the current US-China tension. And the tension has two aspects. First is the technological competition between the two nations. The second is the competition in international technology standard setting. The latter is very important because global technology standards are the crucial benchmark for the development of the technology regime. And so far, it is mostly developed countries that decided the global governance rules for technology use and establish organizations that effectively enforce agreed norms and procedures. On the other hand, China has been wanting to play a more important role in the standard setting for a while. So you can see that China makes a lot of effort to increase its role in the international technology network. You see several state-led initiatives, for example, the Made in China 2025. At the same time, you also see non-state actors play an important role in the governance of technology and a standard setting. One example is Huawei and its 5G network. The second example is Alibaba and its EWTP, a network that tried to enhance the public and private collaboration for better electronic trade. But then again, China's ambition are causing concerns from the West. For example, the US and some other European countries are concerned about the strong competition from China. And also they are wary about the Chinese government's intervention in the digital and telecommunication industries. So because of this, we have seen the escalation of tension between China and the US. We see that on the news very often these days. So I will stop there and leave some time for you to ask questions and leave a more elaboration to the other two panelists.